Now we, KAMP and Trine TRYDEMAN will present their studio, one-to-one landskab. So Jakob and Trine has done the University of Copenhagen in landscape architecture school. They are landscapers, and in Copenhagen, the landscape architecture school is a part of agriculture university. So the period of learning in that landscape architecture school is based a lot on material, quality of soil, water, plants, but in the same time they learn how to do projects. It's a very strong link between project and material and scientific knowledges. The other thing that we could do is, we could say, is that One-to-One Landskap has been founded in 2007, and your first project was a French project in Chaumont-sur-Loire. It was about a competition in Chaumont-sur-Loire, and screen. Well. And then after, what we could say that you develop strong project, developing conceptual things and buildable, not easy to say, buildable projects. And the relation is strong between the both. The other things is that you are developing a pragmatic and poetic. It is the title. So every time you do a project, you just tell us a story. You tell a story just to create the project, and then imagine how to build it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for having us. I think we now reached the last level. Now we're going to be very concrete and show you a lot of examples of built and a few unbuilt projects, so that you can maybe have an idea of how all these policies and strategies actually transform into concrete projects that are built.
This is yeah, it works. Hello. Yeah, we are a small office, and when we started 10 years ago, we really wanted to have something built. So we talked a lot about how we wanted to do that and how we would like an office to be. And we really we had experience from various offices. And so what we really wanted to be was to work, when we did a competition, we wanted to work with it being buildable. But we also wanted to work with a conceptual strategy all the way. So making sure we would get some actually, the best thing would be if you would do the visualization and the start of a competition, and you ended up with a project seeing it was exactly the same. So you could actually keep that idea all the way. And so when we work, we work with a lot of various on various levels. And again, we start with a really conceptual, simple idea, and then there's a lot of layers that needs to be put on that, and that might look a little not so structured, but we keep talking a lot when we work. We actually start a process by putting a lot of words on it.
But as landscape architects, what we really work with is time and scale. It's like the two concepts that are, I think, the most important when you're doing landscape and when you're doing public space, because and I think also it's what maybe differentiates landscape architects from building architects. But maybe what connects us to planners is that we work in a lot of different scales at the same time, and we have a very long time perspective. So I would actually like you all to do a small experiment with me. I would like, also a bit inspired by the first lecture, I would like all of you to close your eyes without falling asleep. Try. And then imagine that you're standing on a beach looking at the ocean, and at the same time you can feel the smallest grain of sand under your bare foot, and at the same time you can actually see the horizon. You can actually almost see that the earth is round. Can you all feel that? Yeah. Now you can open your eyes again, and so you don't fall asleep. But what I want to say with this is actually what the first lecture said, is that the body is really smart. Our bodies senses a lot of things and in a lot of scales at the same time. We can smell the ocean, we can hear the waves, you can feel the wind against your skin, you can almost taste the salt of the sea, and it's all this that we actually, as it's using big words, but I think it's actually what we're trying to do as landscape architects, is to convey this, that we don't only work with something that hits your eyes and your brains, we have to work with something that involves all your senses at the same time. And that's worked in nature, but it should also be the same that we do when we do things in the city. We have the same bodily needs when we're in a city that we have when we're out in nature. So that was a little bit talking about scale, and we have to design, when we design, we have to design in a multitude of scales at the same time. We often, when we do projects at the studio, we started drawing in 1 to 1,000, and then we move to a detail in 1 to 5, and then we go up again to 1 to 1,000, and then we go back again. So it's not like we start at 1 to 1,000, then we move gradually to the detail. You have to go back and forth within the different scales when doing a project, because reality is in different scales. We also work with time. This is like maybe the ideal of a great landscape project. It's an old tree. The projects we do they're not finished tomorrow. They're finished maybe in 100 years or in 200 years. And you have to have that awareness while you're doing a landscape project. Also when you're doing a city. A city has to last for hundreds of years. But at the same time, we're always faced with that people they want instant karma. They want bang. They want to see that something new has happened. They want a new identity. So that's also the time span we're working on. We're working in tomorrow and 100 years, and we have to go back and forth all the time when we're doing projects. Or that's our ambition. We'll see if the projects actually reflect that, but we'll see that in a moment. This is just 2 pictures to show that this is from actually our garden in Chaumont, which was very sort of based on natural materials. This is another project we did in Copenhagen, a temporary city installation, where we brought nature back into the city in an artificial form. It lasted only 2 weeks, because then city life actually
it's a little rough
were a little rough on them. People got drunk and tried to ride them at night, and then they got destroyed. But this is how we try to work, and now we'll show you a lot of projects that hopefully reflects this, and which will hopefully inspire you. And we'll try to show a lot of pictures and maybe use less words.
And urban spaces, we have quite a lot of projects for urban spaces, and we really like to work in that scale. And as Tina said, the urban spaces is a limited resource. A lot of people want big bike lanes. We want lots of different things in the open spaces. So what we work on is to make them democratic, to make them for as many people as possible, instead of just for just a certain group of people. So it would be both make them playful, and also for older people, and also for stormwater management, and lots of various things needs to be put into the urban spaces. And so one example on a democratic project is a small plaza north of Copenhagen, where we kind of a little bit of a mixed neighborhood. So there would be both old ladies that would have that would come from the villas down the road, and you would also have people sitting on a bench, maybe have a beer too. So making one large bench for everybody, and not have them. Then you kind of force people to sit next to each other, and so also that would be that element as to give that karma, that give it that color from the start, that create the identity for the place. The trees and the texture, also working with that.
Another place is what we find is there's actually often a lack of space in the city, so you have to try to find these sort of like cracks and unused places and abandoned places and places that has no name. You probably all passed them on your way to school or from work. You see there's little space that's not used, and this space was one of them. It's actually in the center of Copenhagen, but nobody really knew it. And when we got the job, it was people asked, "What are you doing?" And we're working on this plaza. It's right there, and nobody knew where it was. And the task was actually just to create a ball court and an accessibility ramp from one level to another. But we always try to give people a bit more than they ask for. So what we did here was to create this playful landscape. There's a ball court. There's actually the handicap ramp you see where the guy is sitting with the skateboard. But as Trine started, it's also about creating spaces where everybody feels welcome. And we believe that beauty is actually something that that's the big attractor. That's what everybody wants. We need to do city spaces where people feel comfortable and have a joyful experience, even though it's in summer, but also when it's a rainy December morning and you're just going to work. You need to pass quality city space. It's the everyday life that Tina said before. And now it's actually just become the living room of the whole neighborhood. And the funny thing that after it was finished, the politicians of the city also discovered this place, and suddenly there was a battle of giving it a name. The place that nobody knew before actually suddenly got a name and became a destination in Copenhagen. A totally different situation is in one of the new settlements or development areas in Copenhagen, which is the old Carlsberg breweries, where they placed a new train station and built a huge school, and there's going to be, I don't know how many people living there in a few years. Tina doesn't know either. Okay, but a couple of thousand people are going to live there, and so how do you create something that is a city, or something that feels like a city in a new development area? And one of the things that happened here is that it became a negotiation between a lot of different needs. There was the train station, there were bicycles. We had to put a 5 meters wide bicycle path down the middle of the square. There was another policy that demanded city nature, so we had to do a lot of planting, even though it was on deck, because there's parking underneath. There's a place where you have to have cafes. There was a need for cars to put off people for the station. So it was like this big negotiation between a lot of stuff. And what we realized is that the city that we know and love has actually been a negotiation for hundreds of years. So all these layers of different needs and different programs was actually used here. And then we found this traditional material to paper with the bricks, and then it became this. It's actually it's a big mess somehow of all these different programs put together, but that mess actually forms an identity, and then using the bricks to hold it together and give it a clear, it's like the grains of sand underneath your feet that you walk on. You know that you're walking on quality somehow. You're walking on the earth, and because it was on deck, we couldn't plant any trees, but there was this need for or demand for city nature. So what we used that restriction to create these huge black planters for the trees to grow in, but they actually also became the furniture of the place, a place where people sit and hang out, and now the shops have moved in and they actually use them to put out their goods on, and so a simple necessary architectural gesture actually becomes an activator of all this city life that we want. But holding it all together is that, again, I think everybody became architects because we wanted to create something beautiful. It's not even though we're not allowed to say it, we actually that's what we want to do, and we actually. So sometimes you have to cheat and then put it in, but we always try to do something that has that beauty.
That poetic layer. And yeah. This is a small one of the small urban spaces for a new sports area in Copenhagen, and again a big bike lane running through it, but also how to create this identity, but still giving it back to the city, where you could pass by quickly, but you could also stop and sit, and it's also an edge zone for the public building. And we always try, as Jacob says, that we try to create something that looks good with no people on, but also with a lot of people on, it can be used in a fun way. And this project is actually shows what's on the agenda in Copenhagen, and that's what both Klaus and Tina talked about. That now bikes and activity is big things, and there's a politic behind it that actually means that we can close down a road and make it into a playful path that we would just want people to stay a little bit longer on. So you don't want them to take the straight route. You want them to. You can just pass by it, but you can also take your bike up the bumps, and also it's actually two schoolyards that are combined on this path. So it just really gives it so much more space back, because it's like a local path, local play area, but also the schools have gotten a lot of more space to play on.
Moving on to what Tina also talked about, is there's a big focus on renovating existing schools. We're building new schools in Copenhagen as well, but has been a big focus on renovating schools, and thus renovating the schoolyards and opening them up. And we'll just give a few examples of that work, which is actually quite fun. It's fun working with kids. It's demanding, but it's fun, because you can as a designer have some fun, because you can actually, you can pretend that you're a kid somehow, and you can get away with stuff that is a bit more, you wouldn't get away with it when doing an official public plaza. This first one is Vandløse School, which is just next to the project we just saw before, and it's a really small schoolyard, but using color here, the green, to bind it all together, gives it this coherence that we need, and a lot of the schoolyard project is also about how to combine play with learning and with movement, so that these three functions are always there, so that you can actually go out. Here you can go out and measure the small hills. You can take your maths class outside and do something, or you can. Here you can measure as well. This is really good for mathematics, but it's also fun for climbing, and it also activates the kids. And then what I think also about this project is that kids also deserve something that is nice to look at and beautiful, and they deserve good architecture as well. It shouldn't be something that we let commercial playground companies do. We should do that as architects. It's a really important job for us.
And schoolyards in Copenhagen are all often very small area, so every square meter counts. So we talk a lot about double program the areas. This project is about levels that we had some ramps that, again, as in Charlotte Amundsen's Plaza, we had a couple of ramps that you needed people to go from one place and up to another, and we actually worked with the levels for playful, to make that playful. So one was a big bump and the other one was a big ramp, and this is part of the retaining wall, but it's also a wall that you could play on. So we think about how to explore every square meter so you can use it both for playing and also for learning. And it's basically the same here in this school. It was subsidized by a fund that where they wanted to have the children to come out more and do a lot more activity, to just, instead of sitting in with your smartphone, you would come out and jump and play. And we needed to make it really attractive to come outside. So that's a part of this area. And again, we really try to combine things. And
so here you see, it's actually it becomes a pattern on the ground, but it's also like a place to learn chemistry. Or here, this is actually a climate pavilion where they collect rainwater on the roof, and then it's driven through the whole system, and the kids can learn about water and what water does, and all the beds are planted with different kinds of biotypes from around Denmark, so that they can learn about the plants, because people that live in the city, or kids that live in the city, they don't know the different plants. They don't know which ones are edible and which ones are not, and which ones attracts butterflies and which ones does not. So we have that obligation also to teach about landscapes. This is a traditional courtyard in Copenhagen. The normal way to live in the old part of Copenhagen is in these like carré structure with the inner courtyards, and here we were approached by a client who they had a problem with the bicycle parking. That's actually how this one started, and they wanted something nice to look at. And then it's a really posh area in Copenhagen. So what we did was that we actually created a posh living room for all of them, with an exotic carpet and a nice paved floor. And then again, as what Tina said before, it's also about what you're designing and what you're not designing. We did the floor, but they came themselves with their old furniture and all the planting pots, and they were different, but it didn't matter, because you need also to know when to stop designing, you design something and then you stop and then you let people use it, and it should have a resilience. The design should have enough resilience to remain strong even though people may use it in a different way that you imagined. And the funny thing about this project is actually that it also helped with the bicycle parking, because nobody dared park their cars or the bicycles on the carpets, so they put them all around the edge. So they actually cleared the space for the bicycles, which was the main problem with this project.
And this project is actually one of these projects that you and asked Tina about. A development-driven project where they buy a plot. It was a turnkey project, so meaning that the developer would actually be there from the start and hire their consultants in a competition. And we were hired by a contractor. And because the local plan had restrictions done so well, we actually managed to give back or to give that quality that a new dwelling area should have. It's all on deck, so it's one big roof garden. So it's a parking lot underneath. It's a development from the north of Copenhagen, near to the coast. So we also looked about how should this landscape be. It should not be a classical courtyard. It should be something else. So our reference that we talked about in our office was more like a summer cottage area, where you would have a more wild-growing nature. So we wanted to have a large variety of species, and we work with paths without edges, and it fit very well with the idea and the concept, but also it fit very well with the economy. So what we did was also really to prioritize to make something, give it a really high quality, but also look after some elements that would be effective but not very expensive to create. And so we worked also with the paving as a zone to organize the public area from the private zones, so that it would be very clear what would be the public area and what would be the courtyard, what would be the citizen, the one that would move in there, what would be their area. So you would, without fencing, could show a public area and a private zone, which we thought was very important. That you knew what was in the area where you lived and what was for everybody. And so we wanted it also to be cozy.
We're going to show a few park projects as well. We're moving fast, I think. We're the fast track here, so we'll keep the time. We're Scandinavian, with Danes are very keen on keeping the times. This first park is a pocket park. There was part of the policies in Copenhagen was to create small green areas, so-called pocket parks, inspired by New York, and often they were done in close collaboration with the people that lived just around the area. Also this one. Oh, ooh, I'm moving the wrong way.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so what, again, we really wanted to make it very, very clear make it a clear concept. So when the citizens in the process wanted flower beds or playgrounds or a scene, we would know exactly where to put it. We would know that the flower beds would be in the green area, and if they wanted a playground, we would create a playground, but we would do it a way that it would become an architectural element. And so it became this green lawn with flower beds, and instead of a traditional playground, it was a large wooden deck that would be like a kind of a huge furniture that would vary in the shape, so you could play on it. But it would also create an edge from the green recreational area to the more urban edge, and a small plaza where you could actually also work with stormwater management. This is a storm water management area that we created a certain architectural idea for. So it became a small, clear plaza.
So when it rains, it does like this, and then after the rain, it becomes actually these small puddles that some of them, where the water will sink down into the ground, and on the top ones it will evaporate, and then there's a planting of. That's also how do we create city nature. It doesn't always have to look like nature. This is actually will become a forest of oaks. There's 6 different species of oaks planted here. So in the long run, in 50 years, this will actually be a grove of trees where you will have these puddles underneath. Right now, it's the puddles that plays the main role in the drama, but in time, it'll actually be the trees that'll play the main role.
And that's the edge where it's not a traditional playground, but it's a huge furniture that you could sit on and play on, and also gather for a concert or things you want to have in a local area.
But it also works when there's no people. We have to design our city spaces so that they work when you see these architectural competitions. There's always, you see these renderings, and there's people everywhere, and there's kites flying and a brass band playing, and there's no end to it. But we actually have to imagine these spaces. What do they look like without people? Do they work when you're there all by yourself? Do they give something back to you, to all your senses, when you're there just by yourself? And then there's the garden. The funny thing about this was sometimes you have to pick to what degree the citizen involvement should be. And here we did it by having an open day, and we had this common wish a flower day. So everybody who lived around could come and name their favorite flower. And then we would make sure that it was planted in the garden afterwards. So this garden actually contains 92 different kinds of flowers. And it was really smart, because then they gave a lot of thought and a lot of attention to that specific flower. So we could get to do the designs by ourselves. They didn't get involved with that, and that was really practical. Oh, good. I'm going the wrong way all the time, I'm sorry. Another small transformation area in Nørrebro in Copenhagen it was just a lawn. It was one of those lawns that was designed 80 years ago, and now it was just used for people with big dogs, and that was about it, actually. And then we got a call from, actually not the technical and environmental department of the city of Copenhagen, but the ones concerned about health. they wanted to create something for, I can't even say it in English, but it was for adults that didn't usually do exercise. And they wanted to create something that would attract them. They were thinking, of course, about men in their 50s. How do they activate them in a public space? And that was the task. I don't think we actually... We didn't succeed on that one, but we activated a lot of other people, but I don't think we so like got to the men in the 50s. But it's, again, doing it with doing something that is really simple, but then it turns out to be something that is perceived not simple. I don't know do you know what I mean? So that the idea here is actually, it's 10 hills, small hills, it's 75 trees, and then it's 200 light blue poles. That's the project, which is on paper really simple. But putting it together, it creates a variety of spaces and spatial experiences, and then some of the poles, I think it's about 60, are then equipped with different types of equipment. Here it's a 3D climbing labyrinth, and there's swings, and there's things that you can actually do sports on. If you want to, you can just also sit on a bench and watch someone else do sports, or you can just sit in the sun, read a book. But what the blue poles here also does is that they make the citizens aware that the space exists, that there's actually a space here that is an invitation for people to go there, to just sit on. Before, nobody came, nobody knew where it was. It's again one of those projects where we were saying, oh, we're working on Guldbergs Plads in Nørrebro, and people were saying, oh, I don't know where that is. And now, 2 years later, you could say, Guldbergs Plads was, it's that place with the blue poles. So sometimes architecture also has to be it needs to be a sign that you come here and use me, come here and you can actually use this place for different things. And one of the things here is that actually you can just, I'm really bad at this, sorry. You can just come here and sit on a bench. The idea is that it's a bit the idea of nudging. That the first time you come here, you walk by and you say, oh my God, what is that place with all the blue poles? And then the next time you say, okay, I'll walk through it. Then the next time you go in and then I can just sit on a bench for 5 minutes. And then the next time you go and sit on a bench, you see somebody's actually climbing that thing. So the next time you come, you think, oh, I can actually also climb that thing. So it's this sort of gradually inviting people in and inviting them in to use the public space in a different way. And then we left, I think 100 of the poles, we left them unprogrammed. Again, as an invitation that people could use them. Maybe in 2 years, somebody will have a really good idea on what to use 100 light blue poles for, because we couldn't come up with anything more. But they'll probably come up with something, and then that will again create a different place. And then again, in 50 years' time, they'll probably take down all the light blue poles, and they'll just have a forest of larch trees in the middle of the city on some hills, and that will also be great. The last two projects we're going to show are not yet built. It's 2 parks in Copenhagen. The first one is a stormwater management park. It's actually sort of like just the what do you call that when you have a road on each side and in the middle you have a green sort of like strip with some trees? A nu? No, it's just right now. There's no nude. It's just It's just another one of those green areas that we have a lot of in the city that nobody uses. So there's one of those here with some trees on, and we were given the task to put in 1,500 cubic meters of water and keep all the existing trees. So how do you do that? And then we had a lot of citizens' involvement as well that had a lot of wishes to what they wanted to do with this space. And they had a lot of really different ideas. So that one group wanted something and another group wanted something else. So how do we accommodate all those wishes? And what we try often to do when we do projects is actually, as architects, you have to prioritize. You're actually prioritizing all the time on behalf of someone else. You're trying to organize and say, this is more important than this and then this. And you do that spatially. And here we did it by creating 8, we call them abandoned swimming pools, because we found this picture on the internet, or actually our intern found this picture on the internet. We might as well be honest where you get your inspiration from sometimes. And so we found this picture, and it just triggered what this project was about. It was about water, it was about activity, and it was about city nature. They wanted to create something that heightened the biodiversity of the place. And this is what this image was. And so what we did was create 8 different swimming pools, so 8 swimming pools with a different content, so that all of these citizen wishes were actually given each a swimming pool. And then we have the bridge that ties it all together. And that's really, in a way, really simple, but it will become, I think, a really complex park when it's built. This is actually the same place as this is when it's filled with water. This is another one, it's the beach lounge. And here you have the forest play area. And then one fun one is that, and one we can't show images of, is the 8th swimming pool, which will actually be a closed off area for everybody. So that where we will let nature have its own way. So you can't enter it, and we'll fill it. It'll be the pool that'll be filled most often with polluted city water. So we're actually trying to create real city architecture or real city nature. We're trying to see what happens when we combine nature's own dynamics with the pollution that we create in the city via the water, and see what happens. It's an experimentation field somehow. And the fun thing is, as Tina said before, the citizens were really, they think this is so fun, and I think they'll go and watch, and the schools are already planning that they will go and register every year what happens in that pool. So hopefully it'll become a new kind of city space somehow, that these experimentation fields.
This is another big park that we are working on right now in a new developed area, and I think I'll just show the next picture here. As Jacob said, the parks there's been a kind of a new focus on public parks in the past 5 years, and it has been climate driven, but to use the parks as large reservoirs for water, but also it becomes areas now where you can also not only have a large water area if you need to, but you also can do activity, and the whole urban farming movement, you can also put that into the parks. So there are a lot of, and the whole social sustainability, looking your neighbor in the eye, or just going through and just passing through. So create areas that actually brings people down from their apartment, That has been there's been a lot of talk about that. And this is actually a private-driven, developed area, but they're still using the area in the middle, 20,000 square meters. They're using for a new big public area. It has been. This area was a fruit and vegetable market with a large. A huge warehouse, almost all the place as the park is now. So some of the pillars from that warehouse, we are keeping them. So you can kind of have that, you can get that idea of that it was something else. And the urban gardening movement felt really into that idea. But we also talked about that what's difficult is that maybe in 5 years' time urban gardening is not popular anymore. So you have a big, large park with that. So how can you grow something, and how can you tell the story without having small vegetable beds that are a little bit difficult to maintain? So the whole idea of a fruit plantation instead was, we thought, gave a really good sense here. And we divided the park into 3 areas. A large orchard, a large fruit orchard, a huge lawn in the middle that's pretty much unprogrammed, because we find it really important too that it's also sustainability that keep things that you can actually just be there, and you can maybe in 20 years' time, you want something else to be there, and you have space for it. But having just a break, just with nothing, just being able to play football or run around with your kids, we thought was really important too. And then the developers talked a lot about activity and how to make urban life. So we did a really urban promenade as well. So instead of having a lot of various plazas, we could buy a little bit of cafe, and we were kind of concentrating it. So we're kind of concentrating both recreational life in the orchard and the lawn, and the city life in the promenade. So it's very clear it's very clear for the future to where to put new activities. So you can keep developing it. So we're talking a lot about making some really a base for making a base park that you can actually develop on. But in the same time, it should look really good from the start, and it should have quality material. And so we're working on this large promenade with various concrete patches that brings again a little bit of an industrial warehouse feeling, but also just being the sand corners, as we actually talk about every time. What is the pavement going to be? What story is this? And here it's a kind of the warehouse drawing the industrial story, but also also in a contrast where the trees are growing up through the pavement and their flower beds, so it's in a romantic setting. So working on that contrast, we found is working really well.
That was the last project. But just to finish off, we try to put down in words what we do and how we try to also it's kind of a rules that we set for ourselves. So what we try to do is we keep it simple. We think in contrast.
We're being multifunctional.
We enhance and concentrate.
And organize and prioritize.
We create architecture with plants.
We're being true to the site.
We create durable solutions.
And trying to be pragmatic and poetic every time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for this beautiful presentation. Well, you are explaining to us that you keep attention to the context very strongly, and the project is just coming from the sites, even from the grounds. For example, the orchard came from the history in a certain way, and you have also in several projects some secret purposes. Because, for example, the project with the carpet, did you expect that people are not going to park their bike on the carpet?
We didn't know that.
Okay.
We didn't know that. But the funny thing is that we actually try every time to... I think we invent a story together.
Yeah.
We try to create a story together, and based on the site, you can see that none of our projects look the same. There's a lot of... You'll meet a lot of landscape architects that you can always see that, oh, it's that one, because he always does like that, or she always does round things, or always have... But all our projects look different because they're based on different contexts, they're based on different sites. But the story that we create from the specific site actually helps us in our prioritizing when we are designing. But I found that it also often helps other non-architects to be aware of what is most important. Actually, with the carpet one, when we started digging, we found out that they had to change their sewers, it was bad soil, they had to change everything. But all the citizens, all the people living there were like, but we need to find the money because we want to have our carpet. That sort of like image of the carpet was already there before it was there, and they actually, they all raised their, what is it called, the rent in order to have the carpet. So that was actually I thought that was almost touching as an architect to find that people were willing to pay more to get a carpet.
Okay, thank you. Maybe there is some questions.
I am sorry, I was not at all conference, but the first who does the plan of urbanistic plan from Copenhagen was Rasmussen, no? You don't speak about the... C'est qui a fait les plans de Copenhagen au départ, très rectiligne?
Non.
C'était... j'ai un livre là-dessus sur les... C'est pas Rasmussen? Non, je voulais juste savoir. It's a question.
The first age of Copenhagen.
Qui a fait les plans, c'est pas Rasmussen?
We will do that next time.
We'll do the figure time plan next time.
Non, mais c'est très cool.
Ah ben peut-être, mais est-ce que tu
Je voulais savoir.
Ah ok. Well, maybe you find the answer. I don't know. She wants to know who designed the first master plan of Copenhagen.
Sten Einar Rasmussen back in 1947.
Yeah.
Okay.
47.
1947. Non, 40 c'est 47.
And it's still the regular plan that we are following.
Perhaps just you mentioned it about the project with the carpet, but what I'm very interesting is about the fundraising, because when you do projects with people or private-public projects, more or less, what is the instruments you have, or what is the process you can do, how to get the money, to say it clearly? Is there you also do a kind of management of process, or how is your way to work when you do this kind of projects? Is it more kind of bottom-up process?
No.
And you are really in contact with all the inhabitants, or is it more the client or the the stakeholders. They are in contact with you, and they give you the information about the people they want to have this or this. This
but we often you have a pre-qualification round and you have a competition for that, and then you get the project, and in that project you would have a certain economy and you would have a certain program, and so usually we just, that's our job to prioritize. So we should work with that economy that we're given on the project. And so we should help best possible to listen to all the wishes and dreams that the client and the citizens have, and we should help to make most of them to work and create that coherent, that give them identity that really makes them feel that. So we talk a lot about prioritizing all the time, money and square meters as well. Yeah.
And then I'll go here. There's also a difference whether it's a private client or it's a public. Some of these are done for the city of Copenhagen, and the city of Copenhagen has a policy for citizen involvement. But we found that we often have a specialist on the team, like we have an engineer, we have a specialist in citizens involvement processes, so that so that the citizens feel that they have a lawyer, so that it's not us that are both, so that we can be architecturally professional.
Okay, you don't have to do the management of the process. The process is
well, we often have the overall responsibility for it, but then we hire someone to do the actual work, so that we don't facilitating it, so that we don't have it. It can be difficult being the one that designs and also being the one, and then you have to shift your cape, and then you have to be the one facilitating. So having someone else doing the facilitation actually helps us being professional architects.
Inside the office?
No, it's a consultant that we hire. But often when we do some of these public projects, we don't do one proposal. We start often by doing 3 or 4 very, very different proposals, so that you can actually, if you go this direction, then you get this, and then if we together with the citizens go that direction, we get this, and then it often ends up as a compromise between it. But it's very good for the process to have these sort of like very extreme proposals in the beginning.
And talking pros and cons all the time, because you can't have everything. So if you choose this, you do not choose this as well. So yeah.
Is there any other question or? Ah ben voilà.
I was wondering, watching your presentation, I think everything you showed is located in Denmark. Am I right?
Yeah.
Did you select Danish projects because you were here, or do you work mostly in Denmark, and is it a choice?
Mostly in Denmark. A little bit in Norway and Sweden, but mostly in Denmark.
And is that a choice of life or a choice of work to stay?
Both, I think. We're not seeking it. We're not aiming for it.
But we're not opposed to working abroad, but it has to be a really interesting project.
Yeah.
We don't want to go abroad just to go abroad, and we don't want. And also it's also a question about money. Because it's not like the fee in, for example, France or Germany is higher than in Denmark, but we then have to travel also within that fee, and so. It's
and also,
being pragmatic.
And also we're not dreaming about being a lot of people in our office, and we really like to be involved in the project. So there's a certain limit of time and how many projects we can actually be involved in.
So, and then you are now at the threshold of becoming a world famous. Where would be the threshold of between a happy local office and a world famous unhappy office?
maybe we can be a world famous local office. I don't know.
And happy, hopefully.
We want to have a happy work life.
Yeah. Well, I think it's an extra reason to thank you for
That's
coming.
what we're aiming for.
So, because you obviously didn't come here to only to get projects. Maybe I hope you will, because as a Strasbourger, I'd be glad to have your project really implemented here. But, more questions?
Maybe we just finish now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.